Are we live? Broadcast is live. Broadcast.
Live.
It's always confusing from this end. Okay, I have some weird. Hold on, let me get an appropriate camera. Probably should have did this before we went live. There we go. What's up, wrestling fans?
Speaking of confusing, Doug, it's Wednesday night, so you know what that means.
Indeed, I do.
It's the Two Bros Wrestling Show. Wait a minute, it normally doesn't mean that.
You know, you never can tell about us. I may be here, I may not be here. It may be Sunday, it may be Saturday. For a premium live event, it may be a Wednesday night now.
Well, we are doing Wednesday night because the storm had some plans. The winter storm this weekend had some plans that made me had to shuffle some plans of my own. And then this Sunday we're not doing a live show. So rather than go a few weeks without seeing everyone, it's been eventful couple of weeks in professional wrestling, and so we're live with you on Wednesday night after a very eventful AEW Dynamite, which we will definitely be getting into here in a few minutes. But Doug, our main event topic tonight is: Are you ready for some romance?
You know me, Kevin. I'm always ready for some romance.
It's the Valentine season, so the two bros come at you from a place of love tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of wrestling weddings on this season of Valentine's Day. But Doug, as we do,
opening bell.
It is the right.
You're driving.
I'm driving. You're driving. Is the opening bell. And news-wise, my goodness, where to start? How about we start from a place we've started a lot at over the last 2 years, and that is layoffs in WWE. We pretty much knew after 2 years worth of, an entire roster being let go, that no one was safe. But when I thought no one, I really didn't think
this man would get cut loose.
McMahon, Doug, let's talk a little bit about that. I can't imagine bigger news than Shane McMahon being released from WWE by Vince McMahon. And this is not some Attitude Era McMahon family drama angle. This is the real deal.
It is a bizarre world we live in now, Kevin. I mean, when Shane can legitimately get fired. I mean, he's left the company before to go off and forge his own path, only to triumphantly return. But he was legit future endeavored after the Rumble.
And for those who maybe have lived under a rock that don't know exactly what it is we're referring to, Shane McMahon returned at Royal Rumble. If you didn't see our recap show, we're still in the archives. You can hear our take on that. But Shane was actually one of the last participants left in the Royal Rumble, and it was his first match since WrestleMania last season. And so it definitely seemed like he was back in the picture and on his way probably to his annual WrestleMania focus match, which from all reports is exactly what the plan originally was, and that includes him being booked on Elimination Chamber on his way to WrestleMania. But after getting dumped by Brock Lesnar out of the ring, apparently things just continue to go downhill for Shane. Apparently Shane was one of the producers on this match behind the scenes, and according to reports, decided to pretty much book the whole deal around himself, and in many ways was not only undercutting his fellow producers, but also going specifically against some of the wishes of another McMahon who has just a tad bit more seniority on him, none of which said very well with the elder McMahon. And Shane was essentially sent home over it. And the quote that I loved is that from a rather wanting to stay anonymous writing team creative member who said that in a very semi-quiet way, they were told that there would be no more creative discussions concerning Shane moving forward.
And I think it's hilarious that, a news story making the rounds was that, AEW had been warned against hiring Shane for his attitude.
So yeah, you bring up an excellent point. Obviously, Shane McMahon, despite his age and lack of believability as a threat to anyone in the ring, you would have to think that it is a dangling carrot there for a Tony Khan to steal the boss's son away from WWE. Those rumors started making the rounds almost immediately that Tony should hire him, but I never saw this happening, but I really don't see that happening. I mean, other than the cheap pop that you would get for the shock value of it, I really don't see the point long term in investing any sort of money into a
Not at
Shane.
all. Not at all in AEW or WWE, honestly.
If he would undermine his own father, I'm not sure you'd want him on board to, in any sort of creative role or money role where you would invest in him to possibly come and undermine your own company. Again, just to get that, jaw drop shot of some fan in the crowd who can't believe what he's seeing.
Yeah, to get our 2022 Ms. Girl. Yeah, not worth it.
Exactly. Not worth it. Do you see long term? I mean, I know that and typically WWE wishes folks well in their future endeavors, and they make a deal about the whole release thing and no compete clauses and all that. But this one was handled quietly. WWE has never actually publicly commented or confirmed on it. Do you see this as family drama that'll blow over and Shane will be welcomed back in the fold, or do you think this is the real deal and that at least for the short term, Shane O'Mac is not going to be on our TV screens?
Yeah, I see both of those things happening. This is family drama that will eventually blow over. However, in the meantime, we're probably not going to see Shane O'Mac on any TV for the next year or maybe more. He may come around next WrestleMania season. Maybe something at SummerSlam. I still think even SummerSlam would be way too soon for this. Shane is out and flying under the radar for at least the next year.
Unbelievable. Again, just when you thought you'd seen it all and no one's safe and anyone can be released from WWE, they managed to surprise me. What can I say?
Never say never in wrestling, brother.
Never say never in wrestling. That is absolutely the truth. Moving on to much, much happier things, and this relates to what we just saw actually on AEW Dynamite. This would, in any other normal week, had been my top news story, but the expected in this case, instead of the unexpected, is with Shane, but the expected in this case happened tonight, and it was I was going to say glorious, but probably should say limitless.
Limitless. I think limitless would be more appropriate.
Keith Lee's back, Doug, our buddy, friend of the show.
Friend of the show, Keith Lee is back and being appreciated once again. And once again, limitless. No bear cat, bear claw, whatever he was.
The bear claws have been put away, and the impact was immediate. The pop he received had to be heartwarming to someone who has not only gone through it over the last 90 days following a release, but just really the whole year leading up to it, the mysterious way that Keith Lee had been treated, and to have him return and then almost immediately wow us with that unbelievable bill that he threw that just goes to show that is the Keith Lee that used to hit those amazing spears out of nowhere on Adam Cole, sending him flying into the crowd and things like that. That's the guy that we've been missing.
Indeed it has. And I think we're really close to a show topic about AEW and their embarrassment of riches at this point.
An embarrassment of riches. And I guess and we are actually going to get to a really tough conversation as to who do you cut if you have to cut, because it is an embarrassment of riches. WWE didn't know what to do with all their shiny toys, so they just started letting them go or wasting them. I don't think that hopefully AEW will learn from WWE's mistakes, but there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, and AEW is getting precariously close to that. And there's still some other really tantalizing free agents that could tip the needle and change things up a little bit, but you got to find space for them.
And it looks like the forbidden door is definitely open. There was a double tease to what Tony Khan was saying on Twitter all last week, when we also get Switchblade
again on a normal week. It wouldn't have been Keith. It wouldn't have been Shane. I would have led with, oh my gosh, Switchblade. It's maybe all elite. And yeah, that's almost a footnote to tonight's really strong edition of AEW Dynamite. But for those American fans who maybe don't get to catch Impact, where Switchblade has shown a little bit of what he can do, and then even further back as a younger performer on ROH. But New Japan's where he's made his bones, and it's looking like a more broad American audience now is about to be really overwhelmed by the just sheer talent.
Yes,
where's this guy been?
This man is an amazing heel, an amazing worker. I'm super excited to see, even if he's just flirting with AEW through more of a talent exchange than anything else. I'm super excited to see this. And we got them back to back, a Switchblade tease just on screen for less than a minute.
Yeah.
And then right after that, Limitless Keith Lee in the ring.
Yeah, you want to change the narrative of the wrestling world from talking all the negative about WWE and start talking about positives in your promotion. That's how you do it. The way they booked tonight's show with two really for hardcore wrestling fans, like again, the mouth drop moment. We would have had a bunch of we saw a bunch of Ms. girls in the crowd tonight when Keith Lee walked out of those curtains.
Yes, we did. I gotta say, I was just slightly disappointed when CM Punk's partner wasn't a WWE recent release, because I was just waiting for the Godzilla music to hit. I'm like, yes, let's get Punk and Joe out there. But I'll take Mox.
And it says something about the how the bar is raised on surprises by Tony Khan when Jon Moxley and CM Punk teaming up in 2022 could be considered a letdown in any way and fashion whatsoever. Oh, craziness. While we're on the topic of AEW, Doug, I know that you won't mind me doing a couple more AEW related stories, but
it's all the wrestling I know, Kevin. So
AEW has announced the compilation album titled Who We Are, a celebration of excellence, volume 1. It's a 21-track album, which, according to its news release, is, quote, to bring to life the stories of more than 20 Black AEW wrestlers through the music of established hip-hop and R&B artists. It's a charity album. Bootsy Collins, the legendary bassist Bootsy Collins, is involved. The album is releasing on February 18th. In the past, AEW has taken a bit of criticism for the lack of Black athletes in prominent positions within the company and on the card. So February being Black History Month, and this effort is a good way to maybe turn the page on that back history and boldly into a more positive future on the subject. So kudos to AEW for that. Rio is back in Japan rehabbing a broken collarbone. So there has been no timetable given for her in-ring return. Moving on into other news and to other promotions, we're going to go ROH for a second. I know that we're still a couple months away from the hopeful revival of the promotion, but in the meantime, what ROH has done, they've announced the establishment of its very own Hall of Fame. And what they're doing is every Monday in February, they're announcing a new inductee. And this is also a rather clever way not only to keep them in the news, but to keep programming on the air, as every episode of ROH TV in February, since they are not currently a promotion with any signed talent or matches taking place, but every episode of ROH TV in February is going to be a raid on the archives to feature a latest inductee. And so, to the surprise of no one, the very first announced inductees were current Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions, perpetual Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, I believe. The Briscoes were the very ones to go in first. They were also on the very first show, wrestled in the very first ROH match, and then stayed with the company pretty much for the duration of the 20-plus year run that it had. And then this past Monday, they announced Bryan Danielson. Again, no surprise, ROH legend. He has the third longest ROH world title reign in the history of that promotion. He's also the man who unified the world and pure titles. So both have a very long and storied history with Ring of Honor. And it's really kind of neat, Doug. I watched last week the episode on the Briscoes, and they showed that very first ever Ring of Honor match. And then you got to see a early 2000s main event with the Briscoe brothers taking on Amazing Red and AJ Styles, a young AJ Styles. So it's going to be fun to see what they pull out of the hat for the Bryan Danielson episode, which should be airing this weekend.
That sounds really cool, man.
Really cool. A young
Really
Bryan Danielson
cool.
maybe up against some of the top tier Japanese talent,
Yes.
or maybe a Nigel McGuinness in the reuniting of that pure title. I mean, there's a lot of great Ring of Honor matches and moments that Bryan had before really the rest of the world even caught on to who Bryan was. In related news to the Briscoe brothers, the National Wrestling Alliance has announced the return of the Crockett Cup Tag Team Tournament. The aforementioned Briscoe brothers that I just talked about are among the first 4 tag teams to be announced for the March 20th event, which will take place in Nashville. The other 3 teams are Love Rebellion, the British Invasion, and Strictly Business. So NWA making some moves. Back to WWE. SummerSlam has a location and a date. Doug, we might want to take note, and folks in our region take note. It's a little closer than we would normally find these big ticket events, but it's also earlier this year. The biggest event of the summer is going to happen in July instead of the traditional late August, but July 30th in Nashville, not that very far away. We have SummerSlam coming, folks, so mark your calendars for that. Doug, we'll have to talk about that ourselves.
Yes, we will. That's an off-air conversation.
And it is. And in a programming note, if you're wondering why your DVR maybe taped some curling instead of some mat action, that's because NBC Universal is in the middle of the Olympics, and therefore both Raw and NXT this week were preempted from USA and were shifted over to Sci-Fi. That is going to occur again next week, so make note. Make your plans, and please, for Vince's sake, do so, because it was the lowest rated Raw in history on Sci-Fi this week. So a lot of folks did not find it after the move, and I know that this really hurts the ratings when you have to bounce around on channels. It hurt during the baseball playoffs. It hurt AEW. It's just not good for wrestling when fans have to go find you. Sometimes they just don't take that effort. So.
This is so true.
Doug, I'm going to end on this note. Finally, Ric Flair is a bachelor again, ladies. So the Nature Boy announced last week that he and his wife, Wendy Barlow, are splitting up after 4 years of marriage. The couple originally met all the way back in 1993 when both were working for WCW. And then for a very brief time, Wendy was actually Ric's valet. Flair has been married 5 times, and it's probably a good place to pivot because we're talking about love and marriage.
What you did there.
Oh, I hate that for Nature Boy. I know she stayed by his side when he went through his health problems and the like, but man's been married 5 times for a reason. But best of luck to the 2 of them, and they've asked for folks to respect their privacy, but it is love and marriage, and it is tough, Doug, in the world of professional wrestling to mix the 2. Relationships are tough in general. Marriages are tough in general. It takes work. But when you're talking about one or both of the participants being on the road all the time and the temptations of the road, it can sometimes lead to trouble and hardships, which is why so many wrestling marriages do not last. But then there's wrestling marriages and there's wrestling marriages. And that's our main event topic tonight. Doug, in honor of Valentine's Day, I know we think of wrestling in terms of championships and competition and revenge, but it really is just storytelling, and not all the stories are centered around violence, are they?
Well, you have to have conflict. Sometimes that conflict is spurred and fueled by love and and rivalry, and there's been a lot of that throughout the years in wrestling, and which has led to a lot of wrestling weddings throughout the years.
It'll probably come as no surprise to anyone that when researching this topic, what we found is that as many of these as there has been, by far, WWE leads the pack in just how many weddings have taken place. If anything, you could say the others have just followed WWE's lead. But the first wrestling wedding I could find wasn't even until Vince Jr. had taken over, and his idea of more soap opera-ish entertainment. You could sort of see that early on because, Doug, 1984, Paul Vachon married Ophelia. And I feel like I have like slight remembrance of this, but I wasn't really at that time. I was so into the NWA and I had limited access to WWE. It almost seems like maybe I'd seen more recaps and video than I actually saw it at the time.
Looking through the research that you supplied, thank you. I have to agree with you because I don't necessarily remember this. My first actual wrestling wedding is a bit further down here, and it may be like one of yours that's on your radar too, as one of your first memories of a wrestling wedding. But like the first couple, like you mentioned Vashon and Ophelia, and then also Uncle Elmer and Joyce. This does not ring a bell at all to me.
I remember. So like Paul Vachon and Ophelia was the first, and it was in December of '84, and all the heel personalities in that era were kind of in attendance. It was on I think it was on Tuesday Night Titans. I think it was kind of a plug for Tuesday Night Titans, and Captain Lou. Captain Lou. He objected to the wedding, of course, at first. Then, when he found out that Ophelia wasn't a virgin, suddenly he had no problems with it, which I'm not sure I quite understand the
wrestling logic.
Wrestling logic there. But then, of course, Dr. D. David Schultz, who would become famous later for off-screen violent reasons, but he broke up the vows, and so this sort of set a precedent for the fact that wrestling weddings typically don't go that well. It actually ended in a food fight, which is another Vince McMahon trait. He loves a food fight for whatever reason. But the Uncle Elmer one, Doug, was just less than a year later after that, and that one I actually do remember. Did you watch Saturday Night's Main Event as a kid? I know you were an NWA kid like I was, but did you at least catch the NBC shows?
I think I would catch the NBC shows, but again, I don't think my WWE, it was into the 90s before, very late 80s, maybe very early 90s before WWE was really on my radar, just from where I lived and what I could get. I probably was tuning out the WWE shows that were on NBC because, it wasn't the NWA. So I guess I've been a wrestling snob all my life and just now realize that.
Well, let's talk about that for a second in context of our subject matter tonight. Like as a kid, even as a kid, I can remember thinking that I liked all wrestling. If it was wrestling, I'm going to, like you would always say about sci-fi. Sci-fi is better than those. Yeah. I felt the same about wrestling. I watched it all. Definitely an NWA kid. And as a NWA fan, and you're watching like the stuff the Four Horsemen's doing and beatdowns and parking lots and things, and then you turn over and you see Uncle Elmer and Joyce getting married in a wrestling ring, that sort of painted a whole picture really right there. That was Saturday Night's Main Event. And of course I'm watching, but it's like, yeah, this seems pretty cheesy compared to what Flair and the boys are doing.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the Uncle Elmer character anyway was a little hard to buy into, and then you have a wrestling wedding. So even as a kid, I wasn't buying the cartoon aspects of the entertainment in pre WWE back in WWF days.
Yeah. I mean, I was always, even when we became the WCW WWF Monday Night Wars, I think I still lean heavily towards WCW because most of it came up through the Jim Crocker promotions and all that on that side. But having said that, my first real memories of any wrestling wedding would be the next one that we're probably going to talk about here. Where it's Savage and Miss Elizabeth. This on my radar.
Before I get away from with Uncle Elmer and Joyce, I want to call out one thing about it, and it might be the wildest thing about any wedding on this list. Roddy Piper ran down just like Dr. D had done in the previous wedding before. He objected to the wedding, called them out on the hillbilly family and all that. So you just presume it's another Vince McMahon storytelling soap opera. And however, Hillbilly Jim says that it was actually a real wedding, and that at the end of this whole Angle fiasco, that Elmer and Joyce truly walked back through the curtains as man and wife, that they actually had their legit wedding as a wrestling angle on television.
So that is a commitment to the bit right there.
I'm with you, my friend.
Because Undertaker's never done that.
That one didn't seem real, and it was. Now, to the one that you mentioned, even as a kid, I thought, this might actually be real.
Right?
I think most fans, Doug, are like you and myself, that the first, at least of our generation, wedding, and probably not just the first one we remember, even if someone remembers those other two that we just referenced, I think this is the one that's going to stand out even more in most fans' mind, just because of the long-term storytelling. But talk a little bit about what you remember about Macho Man and Liz.
So, with Macho Man and Liz, it was always one of those matches. In my mind, especially as a child, those two just always went together anyway. They just clicked. Of course, they just clicked because they were already a couple. And like you're saying,
which is why it seemed real. Like I really thought that maybe they had exchanged vows, or I thought maybe they were, the show part of it might be that they were renewing their vows in front of us. But it definitely felt like a real wedding, because not only did most of us know that this is the day before, like we all knew everything behind the scenes. We all still knew that they were truly a couple. But it's the rare wrestling wedding where nothing actually went wrong. They actually got married. It went to completion. Now there was shenanigans there were shenanigans during the reception.
Yeah, I was going to call it an after party. Okay, the wedding after party.
We've been married a long time. We don't remember the details on these things.
It's so true.
But yeah, very famous image of Jake the Snake and the snake at the reception.
Was it like a cobra?
Yes. Yes. And all of that was pre-filmed, but everything that took place in the ring seemed real and did not have anyone interrupt. So another way that it seemed real is that there wasn't any sort of angle around it. But I think really not only was this one notable because we knew the participants involved were really a couple, but I think you could argue that this was the most successful wrestling wedding in history, not just because of Liz and Macho Man, but the stories that they were able to pull out of the wedding angle. Because from this, you get both the feud with Jake the Snake, which was a memorable feud for Randy. You got eventually an angle with Liz, the damsel in distress, falling for the poor misunderstood monster that was George the Animal Steel, and showing pity on him. Yes. That came out of that. And then the biggest of them all, of course, I'm saving it to last, is the breakup of the Mega Powers and the friendship of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, which leads into a feud, which was very classic as far as how you pit brother versus brother and someone in between that they're fighting for. And that gets played out a lot over the next 40 years of wrestling history. But the blueprint really is this wedding, isn't it?
I really hadn't thought about it, but it's kind of like its own little a wedding version of the Royal Rumble, where you have all these little stories that break off from that to push your storylines forward for months, if not years to come.
And really, what more could you ask for this type of storyline? I again prefer, obviously, championships and may the best man win and let's fight it out. But if you're going to do romance storylines in wrestling, you could do far worse than something where you're able to turn it into multiple stories that actually play out in a way that is satisfactory. And this one certainly had that. But as with most things wrestling, Doug, when you have a good idea, the carbon copies, and then the carbon copies of the carbon copies. By the time Vince McMahon is fighting someone five spots down the card removed from Stone Cold, you know you're beating an idea to death, right?
Oh yeah.
So poor Stephanie McMahon, Doug, she had a busy 1999. Looking through this list of wrestling weddings, Stephanie had 3 televised weddings in a year. First, she was kidnapped by The Undertaker and forced into a wedding that was broken up by Stone Cold before vows were exchanged. Then she was in the middle of marrying Test, her second wedding, when Triple H interrupted to show footage of him actually marrying Steph at a sham Vegas drive-through. Of course, later it'd be revealed that Steph was actually in on it all along, and she wasn't really unconscious, but that she had double-crossed the old man and was forming a power couple with Triple H, which, ironically...
As life imitates art, art imitates life.
You know, I said that the carbon copies aren't as good, and truly you could go through this list of very forgettable wrestling weddings that I truly had forgotten. But I will give some devil their due here. The Stephanie weddings, for the most part, were fairly memorable. The ones I just mentioned, actually, as I read about them, I had vivid memories of each.
I was thinking the same thing. You know, I mean, maybe this was wrestling for us that was in like a golden era. I think we're in a new golden era right now. We're maybe not WWE, but but you had really good competition. You had, you know, storylines bouncing back and forth. WWE was in the Attitude Era, and WCW was just, you know, kicking and screaming and swinging some knockout punches at WWE. So there was a lot of competition to propel the wrestling and the wrestling storylines forward, and these are really memorable. I mean, yeah.
And it's good that you call out the fact that what was happening in the wrestling world at the time that these went on, because this is arguably when WWE was at their hottest. Mm-hmm. This was all during the Attitude Era, the McMahon weddings, and might mean why they are particularly memorable, especially compared to some of the ones that we'll probably talk about here in a few minutes. But when I tell you Stephanie McMahon marrying The Undertaker, what do you picture in your head when I say that?
Stephanie on the Undertaker cross.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes we don't remember who wins and loses, and we talk a lot about work rate and 5-star matches and 4-star matches. We go 20 some years on, we might not remember who had a 4-star as opposed to a 4.5-star match on that particular night, but we will not forget the controversy of a cross-looking symbol and a crucifixion during the Attitude Era. I mean, so they definitely achieve what they set out to do in that instance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And same for the Test wedding. Poor Test didn't have the most charisma, but Triple H was arguably doing his best work at this time. And the whole drugged up Steph McMahon Vegas wedding thing, I can still remember that like I watched it on Raw last week. And I'm not sure I remember what happened on Raw.
I cannot tell you what happened on Raw last night. Wait, no, it's Monday night.
Yeah. So again, they made some memorable television through these choices of telling stories through the lens of romance and weddings.
But, you know, it's rolling on through this list. Okay, so just bouncing on through the list. Let's see. The next one is this Keebler. I vaguely remember this Keebler David Flair wedding.
So that's yes. That is a perfect example of what happens when you try to follow what the other guy is doing, because up to this point, everything we've been talking about is WWF/WWE. And what you end up getting into is poor David Flair probably never needed to be on TV to begin with. He was not his father. He was not Charlotte or his, brother, who by all accounts would have been a big talent as well. And so that really is no fault of his own that he got thrust into a role he was not prepared for just because of his name. But it was made worse by the fact that by putting him in an angle with Stacy Keibler, you also put him in a position where he had to not only show that he couldn't wrestle, but he had to show he couldn't act. And then it just gave him even more screen time, which again overexposed him and showing how green and unprepared he was for all this. So they were really, Stacy definitely had a place in the world of wrestling, and she had charisma. But this was one of the I think worst wrestling weddings that ever aired on our televisions.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the notes from this one. We had a very soap opera thing here of like, David Flair's not the baby daddy, but Buff Bagwell may have been, it looks like, but they eventually abandoned this altogether, which that's some WWE stuff right there. Like, we start a storyline and just drop it cold.
Yes. And it's never good when it starts out bad and gets worse and then gets dropped because of
it just never happened.
Yeah.
Never happened. We're not going to talk about it anymore.
Doug, let's talk about a few other maybe memorable ones. I'm not saying that this one was necessarily a favorite, but I will say that it stands out above a lot of these, and that would be the Billy and Chuck wedding.
Yeah.
So you remember this one pretty well too, I would take it.
Yeah.
At the time, gay marriage was a lot less accepted than it was today. So the thought of a gay wedding occurring in wrestling, not itself known for being overly progressive, it could be seen as forward thinking at the time. Of course, the wedding didn't successfully complete, with Billy and Chuck admitting that they weren't actually gay and didn't think that it would go as far as it did, that they would be pushed to the verge of saying I do. But as memorable as that was, I think for me, the moment that stands out is that it was probably the night for the best makeup in the history of WWE history, as far as stage makeup goes, because the preacher this night turned out to be Eric Bischoff, who ripped away a very convincing life mask to reveal it was Eric Bischoff. It did not look anything like Eric Bischoff. I could tell it was someone in heavy makeup. I had no idea it was Bischoff. And revealed himself and called out 3-minute warning, who then, destroyed the wedding scene and things. But does that ring bells to you?
It doesn't, because what I really remember about Billy and Chuck is, how, while progressive, to have, two gay wrestlers, it was always played up as a joke, and therefore really wasn't that progressive, because it was like, these two gay guys are the butt of all the jokes, because they're doing all these like gay gags, but it's like, oh, haha, they're so gay, but nobody realizes they're gay. They don't realize they're gay, but then it progresses to, hey, we're getting married, and but then we're not, because again, we're just trying to flip it.
Well, and when you also take note of the fact that the two folks involved in this union were being portrayed as heels. When they're the bad guys, to be booed because they're getting married, perhaps. So maybe your mileage is going to vary as to whether or not an angle like this helped or hurt. Kind of reminds me of back in the day, and I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Husan, and he had a very complicated character where he was portraying how in a post 9/11 world, Americans looked at him different just because of his nationality. And there was a lot of possibilities in an angle like that in a true story that could be told. But wrestling doesn't do shades of nuance very well. No. So what started out as like, okay, let's see where this goes, ended up in being just, Muslim bashing or something, by the end of it, just playing into stereotypes. There's no doubt about it that Billy and Chuck did just that.
Yeah. But I don't remember the Bischoff at all.
Okay.
I do not. Yeah. I'm going to have to hit up Peacock if Peacock will actually work for me to watch old shows. Right now, I think I finally mastered, premium live events. I'm not sure I can go back and watch back catalogs yet.
Well, I will say that it is memorable. Again, your mileage is going to vary about for better or for worse, but most of these weddings, at a certain point, the tropes get so used and they go to the well so many times that there's diminishing returns. Most of these, as you get further down the list, become less and less memorable. That one was memorable, even if it may not be for great reasons. As you mentioned, obviously, Keebler, Flair, another one that was god awful, but I do remember it. But basically, more for the storylines that ended up coming out of it. But the wedding of Dawn Marie and poor Al Wilson on WWE. You remember Tori Wilson's real father getting married in his tidy whities with what may or may not have been a legitimate arousal on live television.
I don't remember this one at all, honestly.
You blocked it out because poor Al was a horrible actor, and it almost was so bad that it turned that corner of being good. It was like Vince realized that Al was really poor at reactions and was really poor at acting, and therefore, the more he put him on TV, the funnier Vince probably found it. And it actually, I'm not sure we were laughing with Al as much as laughing at him, or that he knew he was being laughed at. But you don't remember not just the wedding, you don't remember Al at all, or the story.
I don't remember the wedding. I don't remember any of this for whatever reason.
You're probably better off
from my memory.
You're probably better off because it was pretty god awful, except for the fact that it was almost hate watching. Like, it was so cringeworthy that you couldn't turn away. Once you get that Peacock working and see Eric Bischoff rip off his mask, just do a search for Al Wilson and see what comes back to you. And there might be some PTSD that was why you have it shut out.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. Looking on the list, Lita's had a few wrestling weddings too.
We go there too, and she has. And I have to say, again, this was more close to the Attitude Era when these were still a little fresher and they were differentiated enough that they left some impressions. Lita and Edge had, to me, a pretty memorable one. Even if it's only remembered for Lita's pretty revealing wedding attire that night. And then Kane busting up through the ring and terrifying everyone. That visual of Kane busting through the ring during the vows and the preacher breaking away with oh Jesus Christ, all that just sticks in my head. Do you?
Yeah, I absolutely. Lita's wedding with Kane that had Gene Snitsky involved with it? Or am I remembering this right? And there was the baby. But
no, you remember the angle. Yes, okay. The baby that he
did he punt the baby or something? Am I remembering?
He did. He punted the baby. It's not my fault. I think she lost the baby or something in the angle eventually. And again, in a prestige drama, you might get Oscar films out of this kind of material. But in the context of a wrestling broadcast, you get Gene Snitsky punting a baby doll into the crowd and saying "It's not my fault," which now becomes a phrase. You remember it too.
That is right. Oh my.
Whereas other forms of entertainment might use a scalpel, wrestling will use a sledgehammer every time.
Oh my goodness, a board with a rusty nail in.
Oh man, Doug, I know we touched on WCW getting involved in the world of wrestling weddings, but they were not at all the only promotion to follow WWE down that path. Impact had a pretty checkered past with going to wrestling weddings also. Although they actually had one relatively recent that was pretty fantastic. And I say that because it reminded me of the old school WWE ones in the Attitude Era where they, instead of trying to play it up for nuance and, miscarriages and things that aren't necessarily good fodder for wrestling material, or humor, they just went over the top with it. And I think sometimes if you're going to go ridiculous, just go complete ridiculous.
Well, I think there is that self-awareness that's there too. So,
yes.
You just kind of grab it and run with it. Because I think, more modern day wrestling weddings, you have to include the index wedding on that list where, the trope of something is going to go horribly wrong and they keep teasing it, but it ends up going off without a hitch.
that is one of the rare ones that did go off without a hitch. Now, Impact, the one I'm referring to, didn't go off without a hitch. Johnny Bravo attempted to marry Rosemary, but ended up getting shot and killed. And hey, it happened.
Well, I mean, it's wrestling.
Wrestling, exactly. It led to
follow
up on a weekly basis of almost like an old school Dallas Who Shot JR mystery, where months and months were Who Shot Johnny Bravo, led to a mid-card storyline. It was an ongoing gag. For an ongoing gag, the gag in the mid-card, it was fairly inoffensive and at times actually pretty humorous. Of course, this being wrestling, Bravo miraculously came to life again by the end of the angle, and all's well that ends well somehow.
So I think above all, the moral of the wrestling wedding is, when done right, the wedding itself may or may not end in a disaster, but if done right, you're going to get months, weeks, months, maybe even years of good television out of it and good programs going forward. When done horribly wrong, the promotion's going to pretend it just didn't even happen.
So you mentioned the Index wedding. How many months did they build up this whole family angle? Yes. Johnny and Candace is acting as these motherly and fatherly figures, and Dexter doing these, creep out like stairs and things. That, I mean, the humor and the build up to that actually was great. And then the payoff, you were waiting for more shenanigans that didn't occur. And so they kind of swerved us there. And, everyone came out of it looking good, and, it was entertaining television.
It was. And, I think it's one of the last NXTs that I watched regularly. But
that was the night of the last NXT 1.0.
Yeah, Black and Gold NXT.
Yeah, that was kind of their big finale that night. Yep. Or was it the beginning of 2.0? I can't remember. It was right at the cusp.
It was right at those crossroads where things were passing over. But
I know we've talked more about really the memorable ones, and that's because they were the good ones that stick in our mind. We've pointed out a few of the bad ones, but most of what you look up and find are things that I either have no memories or just vague memories or would rather forget.
Yes.
In general, I can say that they're better used sparingly, that if anything, wrestling went to that well too often. But if they wait 5 or 6 years between them and have the right people involved, you can do an Index. And have a pretty good one. In general, do you like these, Doug?
In general, I think this answer needs a qualifier that it depends. If done well or done really bad, it can be entertaining. Because like you were talking about the one which I have no memory of, where it crosses that line and becomes like this Plan 9 from outer space thing where it's so bad it's suddenly good again, but for completely different reasons. That can be great and entertaining. But then, in general, if done good or done really bad, I'm going to say both ends of the spectrum, yes. Anywhere in between, the mediocre ones, don't care for them.
So knowing that most of these, both good and bad, fall on Vince McMahon's shoulders and his version of soap opera wrestling, and knowing that in general, you and I probably would prefer to watch a 5-star match than to watch a wrestling wedding, I wanted to at least end maybe by presenting you with the fact that AEW isn't immune to this. I know they're a new company and have only been around a short period of time, but WWE may have pioneered the wrestling wedding and other promotions followed suit. AEW could not help but fall into that trap, Doug.
This is so true, but it was the point was to make fun of Miro's last angle in AEW or in WWE. They had to get a little rib in there.
Do you think it was worth it? For those who don't remember this, because it didn't necessarily turn out well for those involved, it was Kip Sabian, Penelope Cruz wedding with Miro involved. I think the point eventually was to spin Miro off of with this. But Doug, for me, this was, Rusev / Miro was a potential game-changing acquisition, and they sort of squandered his, in my opinion anyway, his introduction to AEW by putting him immediately in this convoluted wedding storyline.
Yeah, because I mean, he came in with like this best man gimmick,
Yeah.
and no, that is not what Miro. That is not what Rusev is. He should have came in from day one as God's favorite champion, this beast of a heel, and just went with it. I mean, they eventually course corrected, but I think like we just saw an amazing debut tonight with Keith Lee.
Yeah.
That's you do that with
Yes.
somebody like Keith Lee, with somebody like Miro. That's what you do there, but.
I've been very disappointed had Keith Lee showed up tonight and got down on one knee and proposed to somebody. I'm like,
and then Mia Yim runs in. And
yeah, well, maybe that might have been okay. See Mia, but yeah, AEW probably should have learned from WWE's mistakes, and whether it was a good intentioned jab back at WWE or not, it didn't necessarily work or get folks over. And they did course correct, and Miro's back on the right track, but in small doses. Doug, I think the wrestling wedding is something that can be used. Obvious romance is not the same as violence or competition, but it's another emotion and storytelling element that can be used effectively on occasion.
On occasion.
Looking through all the bad to find the good, if you had to say what the best one of these of all time would be, what is your personal favorite, or what do you think is the most successful?
My personal favorite is the Triple H interrupting Stephanie's wedding to show, hey, look, I got we were already married. She can't marry anybody else, only because I was a huge DX mark back in the day. And, I really, the one of the best things about the Attitude Era was DX, spawning out of the indirect competition to NWO. I really enjoyed that whole storyline, and then Stephanie actually turning on her dad that came from that, where she was in it the whole time. But that's it. That's it for me.
I'm going to give a very trite answer and saying that it's the obvious pick, but I don't know that there's been a better romance storyline told in wrestling than the really real life storyline that was playing out behind the scenes of Macho Man and Liz.
Yeah.
The jealousies that Randy was showing on screen were really the jealousies that Randy would show in real life. And so it was a lot of art in imitating life there, but it was one of the first, and I still think probably the most complete and successful romance storyline ever told. So Doug, before we get off this topic and get to our big finish here, where do you see wrestling weddings going from here? Is there anything out there in the current landscape that you'd like to see done, where they actually bring this back?
Wrestling weddings they're so formulaic because, again, they're either really bad or really good.
Yeah.
It goes off without a hitch, but even if it goes off without a hitch, like the Macho Man Liz wedding, you have the wedding reception, not the wedding after party, but the wedding reception.
Like an after party. I want the after
or the wedding after. I mean, it's wrestling. It's 2022. Maybe they're wedding after parties now. I don't know. I'm a confused old man. But you have those things that can propel a story forward if things don't go off without a hitch, or you have the complete opposite. Either way, if done with storytelling in mind, you could spin them. So I think we're going to continue because wrestling does rehash things often, and there is definitely a formula to wrestling.
Yeah.
So I don't see anything changing. I don't see anything innovative in the pipeline for wrestling weddings, but hey, maybe I'm wrong.
One area I think that they could maybe exploit here in a good way, in just that something that would be a twist on the old formula, and that's the fact that throughout history, wrestling has been rather misogynistic. So the women's role in these things usually was as the slut, the temptress, the reason that the two friends fight. She was just the object that was the secondary part of the men's storyline that would come out of the wedding. There's so much in the way of wrestling talent these days on the female side. I'd love to see those roles reversed, whereas the two, maybe the feud coming out of it, the stories coming out of it are, the bridesmaid and the bride, and that the guy ends up being just the piece that's there to advance the storyline, and the women are the actual focus instead of the other way around, the way it's been through history most of the time.
WWE sort of try that with Liv and gosh, I want to call her CJ Parker. That's not right, is it? Miro's wife, Lana.
Yeah.
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 work a side angle like that. Uh,
Yeah, that's almost the Billy and Chuck thing, though. I think yeah. I think if we had something where it's two friends that are fighting, and they're on the female side, and you had the guy be the dolt instead of the woman be the distraction. There's possibilities there, but again, might require a little more nuance than WWE can handle. Maybe that can be AEW's second wedding if they decide to have go down that road again. And Doug, unless you have anything else to say or like a box of chocolates you'd like to share with me or anything like that, I think we're probably ready to move along.
I got my nice warm blankie, my red blankie, but it's kind of Valentine's Day-ish because it was cold in the studio tonight.
Well, we'll try to warm things up here, Doug, with a big finish. What do you say?
Let's do it. Let's do a big finish.
Big finish. Doug, you want to talk about Botch of the Week?
Let me talk about Botch of the Week because I got one this week, and it actually ties in to what I was going to talk about, but completely forgot about my botch from last week. I did want to mention the because it was in my brain, but then I lost it. I don't know where it went, but it maybe fell out my ear or something. I don't know, but I found it here in the studio floor. That my Botch of the Week this week ties in with what I was going to talk about last week, which is Pac. I think the whole return of Pac was first wasted. I get that they have to do this because Pac always goes home and then he can't travel because of COVID. So then he has to do these tape pieces and whatever. So then when he teased, I think that could have been better teased. I would have preferred that be done in person rather than in video. I get it; it is what it is. But which brings me to my actual botch now for this past week. Last Wednesday's Dynamite, when we had Pac, being led to the ring by Alex Marvez as some sort of elderly gentleman, with the blindfold, with like the stained cheesecloth on, and then going into the Daredevil act. Yeah, I love Daredevil.
Yeah, sure.
I love Pac.
Yeah, I like AEW.
I love AEW, but that was just too almost cartoony, and then you got it with the guys, the Black Throne who are spitting the black mist, and I don't know, it just got to this weird kind of just like not cool cartoony thing, and I'm like, this could have been done, I don't know, better. I'm not sure how. I don't want to be like the armchair like you booker, but God, that all could have been done so much better. Maybe he brings them out, and then immediately,
yes, and that really is yes, that's
I'm not blind. And now the heels getting their comeuppance. Not that I'm not laid out here. The whole build up was just cheesy, like late '80s WWE kind of cheese for me.
I'm with you, and it really is the reveal because I love Brody and Malachi and what they're doing, but it was like you said, if they not have teased it out and played up the whole blindness thing to a ridiculous extent, you could just have him come out and immediately rip it off like, see, hey, I'm back and I'm fine, and you got to the same spot without the cheesiness.
Yeah, but I mean, those four competitors, those four talents are amazing talents. Nothing to take away from him or them, but just some slightly botched booking there. Sorry, Tony. I'll make it up in just a minute.
Oh, I'm sure you will. You'll earn that money, Doug. My botch of the week. I'm going to go last week to men's Royal Rumble match, and for a multitude of reasons. If you all missed it, our review or hot takes version aired right after the show. And looking back on it and having more time to think about it, I'm now thinking that I should have been a little, maybe I was a little too kind in my assessment of the men's Rumble. I think the worst I said was that it was not as good as the women's Rumble and didn't have very many memorable moments. But the more I've had to reflect on it, as well as all the fallout that has come from it, I realized that this has to be the botch of the week because there really was no drama with the ending. I'm fine for the winner being Lesnar, but you still could have got the Lesnar Reigns and had the Royal Rumble winner still be somebody else that would have gone on to challenge for the other title. That would have been a way that would have put a little more drama into it. I'm fine for Bad Bunny making an appearance because those kind of goofy, like, hey, look who's there, is also part of Rumble history. But you usually do that mid-match. you don't have him in as one of the final participants. And then Shane McMahon is one of the final participants. There was not, I mean, outside of Drew, it was a pretty foregone conclusion, even with Drew, that there was no one that was going to win this other than Brock Lesnar. So there was no drama in the winner. Shane's return was not a welcome return. The final slate of participants outside of Drew were all weak overall. And then, of course, you have all the fallout, as it turns out, to the way that it was such a mess was because of True Life booking problems behind the scenes that leads to Shane's dismissal. So all the way around, the men's Rumble match was kind of a mess looking back on it. And outside of the fact that hopefully no one remembers anything other than Brock Lesnar is going to take on Roman Reigns, which should be great, the getting there part was not very memorable.
Yeah, I realized that we were a lot kinder to the Royal Rumble than a lot of other reviewers.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because we were hot off that within seconds of it going off the air, we were on the air, and maybe we were pretty hot. And well, of course, I was a little groggy because I fell asleep during the men's match.
You were just a few minutes awake when you went on air, so you got an excuse.
But we were a lot kinder than most. But
yes. Yeah. Now I do want to reassess that and say that the women's match I still stand behind was good. There was some good. The title matches were particularly Seth's match was good. The men's matches there. Men's Royal Rumble was a bit of a letdown, especially in retrospect. How about Performer of the Week, my friend?
Well, I am going to go with a man I think I've called out multiple times on this show and said, 30 years from now, we're going to see a documentary where he is out of character and we see him as one of the nicest human beings on the planet. But, MJF in the CM Punk match last week, MJF just, that was him. That was Tony Khan strapping a rocket to this kid's back and just letting him go. He's shooting past the moon. The work he did tonight. Yeah, I mean, his heel work is impeccable on his worst days. But you put him in the ring with a veteran like Punk, and I'm just going to go ahead and bring this full circle and go ahead and talk about my match of the week here too, because those two put on a clinic in what is an old school wrestling match. I felt like I was watching something in a territory in a gym somewhere, when I'm like 9 years old again, watching that whole thing. I mean, the match they put together, the way Punk eventually put him over, but still it's a heel victory. Just every little nuance. This kid has done his homework, and he's more than a talker. He can work, and he can work as an amazing heel. I don't think I've ever seen him do any babyface work, and I don't think I ever want to.
No, I can't imagine how MJF would ever be a babyface. He is
Right?
a natural heel and one of the best in the business and still really young. Like, scary how good he could eventually get if he's already this good now.
Absolutely. And just spots that they were doing, the story that they both told in that ring was just a clinic. And this is how you tell a story in the ring. This is how you build, bring back down, build, bring back down, face, heel, the heel wins through shenanigans. Beautiful top to bottom, but MJF's character work, MJF's work through the whole thing, Performer of the Week, and definitely my match of the week.
So for Performer of the Week, I too am going back to last week's AEW Dynamite, and instead of MJF though, I'm going to call out Bryan Danielson. Bryan Danielson has been amazing since his return to wrestling into AEW, but he outside of the work he's doing in the ring, his character work, his mic work has never been better. So what did we learn about Bryan Danielson last week? The list of things that Bryan Danielson does not care for include cowboys, dinosaurs, and vlogs. I mean, just a few of the things Bryan Danielson doesn't like, as he told to Jon Moxley when trying to convince him of why they should be teaming up. And I so want this to happen. I'm sure that storyline-wise, we will eventually get there. But John, don't accept that invitation too soon, because I want to see more pleas like this from Bryan Danielson to you, and trying to convince you as to why the two of you should join forces. The man's definitely been re-energized by his change of scenery and is doing some career best work right now. So kudos to Bryan Danielson. As for match of the week, Doug, I got a couple of markouts. I first went Roman Seth, and then I marked it out and went Punk MJF. But since you covered that, I'll go to my third mark out and say that after the match we saw tonight, Hangman Page and the Murder Hawk Monster, I think the way that, Ric Flair is who Ric Flair is because of Dusty Rhodes and Ricky Steamboat and Magnum TA. It's really your opponents that make both the man and the title reign. So if you want to have a memorable title reign, have it against a variety of top quality opponents that shows you can wrestle a variety of different styles. Yeah. Hangman's gone toe to toe with Kenny Omega, who arguably is the best wrestler in the world, to win that belt. Then had two classics with Daniel Bryan Danielson, and then tonight shows that he can go toe to toe with a man bigger than him in a hardcore style. And they both were cut and bloody and brutal, and all those matches were very different and very good. And so you can't give all the credit just to the opponent. It has to be that Hangman Page is showing that he's leaving a mark on the title, and that mark is tonight stained in blood. Kudos to both these men. They put on an excellent performance tonight. And I kind of thought after Kenny Omega and then kind of wanting to see Bryan down the road, I really thought Hangman is that guy that I kind of like, but I'm kind of waiting for the next thing. And now I'm riding this horse with the cowboy. I want it to go for a while.
Yeah, I love all of that elite crew anyway. The core that formed, because you've heard my rantings about Cody Rhodes being a supervillain, but which was almost a botch for me with that whole Dan Lambert Brandy Rhodes thing from last week, because I did not know what was going on and who I'm even supposed to cheer for in that. But I went with the Pac thing, but. Hangman, I think, is great. So you'll get no disagreements from me with that match.
Yeah, fantastic match. Very believable. Some ouch spots in that. Mm-hmm. And with that, Doug, we have wrapped up a special Wednesday night edition of the Two Bros Wrestling Show. Just a reminder to everyone, this Sunday is, Doug, have you heard of something called the Super Bowl?
Is that a sports ball thing?
It's a sports ball thing.
Okay.
We don't want to go head to head with the Super Bowl because the advertisers pay an awful lot for those commercials, and we do not want to take from their audience. So we will not be live this Sunday, but spoiler alert, folks, be watching our channels, our Facebook and our YouTube, because we do know that Elimination Chamber is the following weekend. And so since we won't be live this weekend to do our normal preview show, Doug and I are going to put some content up for you, just to give you some picks and to get you ready for that. So we won't be live, but we do have some things to watch out for this weekend. But as you can see from the scroll on the bottom, we will be back on Sunday night, which is our normal time at 8:00. We will be talking Elimination Chamber. Doug, Elimination Chamber is from Saudi Arabia on Saturday at noon. So
it's a Saudi show, so it's in the middle of the day on Sunday or Saturday, right?
Rather than go live in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday, let's give everybody, yourself included, time to actually see it, and let's reconvene on our normal Sunday night time, and we can talk not just about what happens and our review of what happens, but maybe even a little bit about the idea of doing these in the middle of the day on a Saturday from Saudi Arabia. It might give us a chance to talk two topics in one as we get everyone ready for WrestleMania.
Sounds good.
With that, folks, I've been Kevin.
And I showed up tonight. I'm awake, too.
And alert. Thanks, Doug.
More rambling than anything. Thanks for watching, everybody.